And we bound and we bend from the beginning of the world till the never end. O Devo Shalom Aleinu, O Devo Shalom Aleinu, Devo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Hi everybody, nice to see you. Nice to have you with me. So let's get going. Let me get this back to where I want it to be. Good. Okay. So we begin actually with some text study because there really is no way to understand what it is that's going on here unless we actually, take ourselves into that realm. So we're looking at Leviticus chapter 23, verses 39 through 43. This is where the whole notion of Sukkot, of tabernacles, which you may have heard of, comes to be. This holiday, or this really is a holy day. This is one of the three festivals, one of the three pilgrimage festivals that occurred in the ancient Jewish society in Israel. And people would try to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem to do the specific sacrifices that are called upon and so on. I have a hunch, a more practical historical hunch, that it's more like the Hajj in Islam, that people will try and get to Mecca once in their lives if they can. And I think that people try to get to the temple in Jerusalem once or twice in their lives if they could. Remember, back then it was, there was no air travel or any other kind of travel. It was all on foot. So if you lived way in the north or way in the south, it was quite a trek. And you would have to put your businesses on hold and your family matters on hold. It became very, very difficult for people, I think. So if they got there once, maybe once for each of these three festivals, that would be a lifetime's worth of accomplishment. Okay. So mark, in other words, put it on the calendar. On the 15th day of the 15th month, when you have gathered in the yield of your land, you shall observe, I marked the 15th day of the 7th month because remember that Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, actually begins at the beginning of the 7th month of the year. It's the beginning of our individual years, yes? It's the beginning of our personal years, of our unfolding of the new year for ourselves and the path that we see for ourselves. And notice it's the 15th day of the month. The separation between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is is a 10-day separation. And now we're at the 15th day. So you can see that Sukkot is right on the heels of Yom Kippur, right on the heels of the last High Holy Day, the second of the High Holy Days. And there's a tradition actually to go from one celebration to the next, or the way it said, one mitzvah to the next, one commandment to the next. And so after you're done with breaking fast at home on Yom Kippur, you immediately go out back and start to build your sukkah. You can do anything very simple like screwing in a screw or hammering a nail into some wood, but it's the beginning that really counts. So, all right. So you've gathered in the yield of your land. This is the fall harvest, because notice what time of year. It's this time of year. Yes. You shall observe the festival of the Lord to last 7 days, a complete rest on the first day and a complete rest on the 7th day. That means on the 8th day, excuse me, that means these are both holy days and they are exactly like Shabbat would be. Yes, that the rest, the abstaining from work and all those 39 categories that we talked about, all of that applies to these holy days within the festivals, or kind of bookending the festival. On the first day, you shall take the product of hadar trees, we'll get to that, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, we'll decide which one that is, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Eternal, your God, 7 days. You shall observe it as a festival of the Lord for 7 days in the year. You shall observe it in the 7th month as a law for all time throughout the ages. Now, there are a lot of commandments like this that happen without any explanation, but we are fortunate that when Sukkot comes along, there's an explanation. And it's not happening for me. Why isn't it happening?
15th day of the
there. You shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I, the Lord, your God. So, Sukkot too is a remembrance of the coming out of Egypt. We've talked about this before, that Egypt gets remembered all the time because it is the quintessential starting point and the quintessential purpose of the Jewish people. That yes, we were taken out of Egypt, or we got out of Egypt and discovered our understanding of God. At that point, when we were exited from Egypt, but in the desert, there's another purpose. And the purpose is that we were nomadic for 40 years. And so one thing I forgot to include in the slideshow was some Bedouin encampments in Israel. And that was us. We put together shelters or booths from whatever we had, which wasn't very much coming out of Egypt or anything that we could glean while we were in the desert. So Sukkah is the name of the booth itself. The booth or hut or tabernacle covered with branches, decorated with hanging fruit, vegetables, and other decorations. I will show you several examples of them. Please know that the booth does not have to have 4 sides. It has to have 2.5 sides of its own. 2.5 sides of its own. It can lean on something else, but it has to have 2.5 sides of its own. And those 2.5 sides need to be built every year for the purpose of building a sukkah. So if you have, I don't know, some kind of a canopy in your backyard and you say, perfect, that'll work for our sukkah. No, it doesn't, because you have to build it fresh to remember the experience of our ancestors. Jewish holidays and holy days are like simulation exercises. They're trying to get us back in history so that we can feel what it was like for the Jewish people of generations past to go through the growing pains of becoming a Jewish people. So in a sense, we are choosing over and over and over and over again to be Jewish. And it's through all of these exercises that we do them. These are, obviously not physical exercises, but they are exercises for the soul. And Sukkot is the plural of Sukkah, and that's how the holy day is referred to, one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. The next 2, the other 2 are Passover in the spring and Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, in the latter spring, early summer, depending upon when it falls. Okay, so here's a very simple sukkah. And you can see, if you look closely at some of the material, that this is stuff that wasn't available to the Jewish people in the middle of the desert. But this is kind of as simple as it gets. You can use wood if you want to be more authentic, or poles of bamboo if you want to. But palm is always the preferred greenery for the sukkah. You'll see that this one actually does have almost four sides. It's got this doorway so that people can go in. They're not going to be very big necessarily, but they can be. And all the palms on the top, according to the rabbis, the way the rabbis understood the building of the sukkah, because there's really no details about it in the Torah and the Bible. So the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud put all of these rules and regulations together. They said you had to be able to see through the roof at some place so that you could see the sky. And that is to remember God's blessing to Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. So at some point you have to do that. Now, if you're building a sukkah in, I think this one's in Israel or Southern California or somewhere, versus in Poland, if you're building one in Poland, you're not going to have a very big view through the roof because it's really cold out there. Remember that this is September, November, September, October, usually when we build the sukkah. So it can be pretty chilly in other climates. Here's another one. This one's a little bit bigger. You can see that this one, has some other kinds of greenery on top because palm fronds weren't available, which is perfectly fine and perfectly legal. But you need to know, although you can't see it, that it comes all the way to the front so that it actually provides a roof underneath the sukkah. And in this one, you can see that it actually does have a chair and tables, so that a table and chairs, so that you can do have guests over for Sukkot, which is a great mitzvah to do in an informal sense. It's not a commandment to have guests in your sukkah, but it is a really nice thing to do. So here's one a little more elaborate and obviously a little bit bigger. This one not only has now, even for some, by the way, bamboo shades will work as the organic material on the top of the sukkah. So this one is kosher, as it were. It's acceptable, but a lot of people will try and go for the greenery if they can. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. But notice that this is really decorated nicely with fruit, right? And with flowers, and it has lights inside. So not only is this going to be something that is used for eating, it may well be used for sleeping, because if you remember all the way back here, it says, you shall live in booths. You shall live in them. And if you're going to live in them, that means that you have to sleep in them. Doing that, again, in the colder climates is optional. The basic thing that you need to do is at least once during the festival, sit in the sukkah, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So this one has the bamboo shades all the way around. It's very beautiful. It's also very small. It sort of just fulfills the mitzvah, right? Of building a sukkah. So a few people can get in there, maybe sit at a small table, maybe sit on the floor, maybe just have a discussion, sing some songs, whatever. This one is, again, a little bit bigger, and you can see more and more decorations. You can already see that for people who were once of the Christian faith and become Jewish, that decorating a sukkah can be a really good replacement for decorating a Christmas tree. Not exactly the same,
Right.
but it gets that decorating urge going, and that's really fun for people. This one too, a little more intimate, lights on the inside, And look, again, I bring this to you because this,
A lot.
now it doesn't symbolize the same
Yes,
things that uh, uh,
he
that the
does.
lights on the Christmas tree
He does
do.
it
The
really.
lights on the Christmas tree are an essential symbol of the Christmas tree. We'll talk about that. But it's also, these are just lights. These are just a series of lights that are decorating the sukkah. This one I really like because I like things nice and open and airy. But, once again, this is not a table that you'd necessarily sit at. It's not even that tall enough, but it is, a lovely sukkah. And once again, these bamboo, now that Pier 1 is closed, I don't know where you get these things, but these bamboo shades come in really, really handy for a sukkah. I like this one because it's really, this one too, is a decorated sukkah with beautiful lights. This one is a great example of hanging fruit from your sukkah. And once again, there's not a palm frond in sight because obviously wherever this is, it's not available. Palm fronds aren't available. So I might as well tell you the story now. There used to be a time when the city of Los Angeles used to time trimming their palm trees for it to be just before Sukkot so that all the Jews in Los Angeles could go and get some palm fronds for their sukkah. And when the word got out that this was something that the city made available, people went nuts. And there were so many people that they then had to send out special letters to synagogues that only synagogues could come and get palm fronds. And at first it was 20, and then they reduced it to 10. And then you see people, with palm fronds in the back of a pickup truck driving around Los Angeles, with hot palm fronds that they got them somewhere, but I don't know how they got their hands on so many palm fronds. And the city obviously gave them away, but they were selling them. So, okay, this one too is very nice. Getting back to the sheet motif. The only thing you have to worry about that, by the way, is that depending upon where you are, if you are, say, in West Los Angeles or Santa Monica, and you're building your sukkah, you really have to watch it in the evenings because that's when the wind shifts off the ocean. And I've seen a sukkah or two take off like a kite because of that proximity to the ocean. Now, this one too is, you can see barely, I guess, how large this one is, right? It's a huge sukkah, communal sukkah of some sort, maybe for a synagogue, maybe for a small chavurah, group of study friends, etc. But with blue and white lights, but again, there's no requirement for that, and those colors came into the Jewish scheme by other means. This is a Turkish sukkah. And you can see the fall fruits in this magnificent arrangement, fall fruits and vegetables in this magnificent arrangement. I have never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything in person like this. It's absolutely fabulous and amazing. And there is some space you can see here to see the light. So this is suspended somehow in the middle. And I wanted to show you this. This is a truck from the Chabad movement. Chabad standing for Chokhmah, Bina, and Dina, for wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. That this movement, this Hasidic movement of very Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, feel that it is their job, to make Jews who are not observant more observant. So in major cities and even some non-major ones, at Sukkot time, they will put a sukkah in the back of a truck like this, and they'll come around so that you can come and sit in the sukkah and observe the mitzvah. There is actually a blessing for sitting in the sukkah, which simply it simply says, in the traditional sense, praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has commanded us with a set of commandments and commanded us specifically to sit in the sukkah. Okay, so by the way, the word dwell is that word sit in the Bible. It's both. And again, Orthodox Jews will take it to its extreme and try and live in the sukkah for a week. Ushpizin, mythic guests that are invited into the sukkahs. These are ghosts of generations past of Jews. And you can't read the Hebrew, so I'll tell you who these people are. This is Abraham. This is his son Isaac. This is Isaac's son Jacob. Now you see the symbolism that's used in these panels. This is Abraham receiving the promise that his children will be as numerous as the stars. This is Isaac going up to the mountain to be sacrificed, carrying the wood for the sacrifice. This is Jacob's ladder. Here's Jacob down here, where Jacob had a dream of angels going, up and down the ladder. Now, it does say, by the way, in the Bible that the angels go up and down the ladder. What is curious to anybody? Unmute yourselves for a second. What is curious to anybody about that notion that it says up and down rather than what you would assume down and up?
They're here amongst us.
They are here amongst us. The angels are already here. Yeah. And they live amongst us and they visit the heavenly realm, supposedly. Yes. So it's a very curious passage in that regard, but also beautiful. And this is Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, and his coat of many colors. Yes. This is Moses and the 10 Commandments. This is his brother Aaron, who was the high priest. And this is a fairly good replica of the kind of dress that the priests would wear. And this is David, huddled over his lyre, his small harp. And here is his shield with his spear, his shield in the corner. And this supposedly was, now this star is not uncommon in the ancient Near East. And therefore it is not surprising that David would have it on his shield, but it did become one of the core Jewish symbols from that time forward. He was a great musician and a great warrior. Okay. So you don't really celebrate Sukkot unless you understand this, that we were homeless for 40 years as Jewish people. We had no place to call our own. So to my mind, you are really not observing Sukkot unless it becomes a time of year when you do something very actively about homelessness. I'll give you some more examples. These are the ones that you see like in my neighborhood and maybe your neighborhood. I think it's just starting to, it's appearing later in Santa Monica than it did in West LA under the freeway overpasses. But nonetheless, this is something that, in other words, if your sensitivity is not aroused to people who are currently homeless and wandering, then you're really not understanding this holy day. Now, I bring this to mind because these are the kind of things that you'll see along the side of fields that farm workers work in. And this is really about all the shade that they get. after working out there all day, or as is what's happening now, during a fire. And so, you know, at one point before the United Farm Workers came into being, these shelters were optional for the owners to provide. Now they're mandatory. And you can see that they even have them now on wheels so they can move them from place to place. And that's one more. I think that's probably in the valley somewhere, Central Valley somewhere.
No,
Okay, so okay, I'm gonna go back for a little bit. Let me see if I can do this. It won't let me do it. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, well, if you remember, we were supposed to take a fruit from this beautiful tree. So this is what's called in Hebrew an etrog. In English, it's called a citron, not the car, but for those of you who are car fanatics and remember that French car citron, this is it is a citrus fruit. This is the stem where it hangs from the tree. This is an essential part of the fruit. So if this part breaks off, it's not kosher, it's not acceptable anymore. This is a fairly beautiful etrog, although if I was really strict and really searching for an etrog of my own, as you can see, you'll see in a slide or two, I wouldn't like this green up here so much, and I wouldn't like the unevenness of the bumps down here, and they're more uniform up and down these other sides. So this is a whole tray of etrogs, etrogim, you know? And you can see that they're various colors. It looks great, but the pure Orthodox are going to search for one that has really nice symmetrical bumps on it, right? And is this deep, deep yellow, okay? Rather than anything green, you know, fully mature etrog. Here's some more. I guess through the lighting, these are not as yellow, but I did want to show you this is what they're looking for, okay? So you can think that this is a lemon, but you've never seen a lemon like this, right? Okay. Whoops. Here they are in a stall where you can buy all the various pieces of what we will eventually call the lulav, and I'll show you that in just a second. Some of these are really green. By the way, they're going to be more expensive the more yellow they are. And they'll be much cheaper if they're this color. Now, one thing, if you remember at the end of Shabbat, one of the things that we do is we say a series of blessings over wine and spices and a braided candle. And what I like to do after Sukkot is to grab an etrog that's around, and you push whole cloves into it, and the smell, the aroma is gorgeous. And so you can use this for your Havdalah spices as long as it lasts, which won't be very long because you punched holes in the fruit, but it'll last for a few weeks. The myrtle component, this is hadass. It was determined to be myrtle. And these are myrtle leaves if you've never seen them before, okay? And I want you to remember the shape of the myrtle leaves, because we'll need that in a few moments, okay? And the arava is the willow. You've seen willows before, yeah? And this leaf also I want you to remember the shape of. And this is how you usually receive all three components. This is the palm frond. It's already been trimmed to this nice stable size, but all of these, this is all the place where the the leafy part is still intact. So when you shake it, it's going to have a rattle to it. Okay. Here are the myrtle leaves, and here are the willow leaves. And when you see it all put together, palm branch with myrtle and willow sprigs attached, like that. This is a lulav. Now, this central part is what we do call the lulav, the palm uh, leaves, or the palm frond, again, trimmed in this special way. This too is palm, woven to hold the branches of myrtle and the branches of willow. There's supposed to be 2 branches of willow and 3 branches of myrtle. And once you have the etrog with it, these are the 4 species that we use to represent all of creation on Sukkot. It really, really, really is a harvest holiday. It really is a celebration of the fall harvest. And for those of you who remember anything about, the original Europeans who came to this country, and how difficult it was for them to weather that first winter, and that they celebrated with a big meal and many, many, many representations of what they had pulled out of their fields that they grew up until that point. You have to know that those Christians who came, because they were Christians, those Christians who came were very biblically aware, and they were aware that tabernacles occurred sometime during this time of the year. And so in a sense, some theorize that they created their own that we now call Thanksgiving. So here's a little bit closer. And again, you can see the shape of these leaves. Again, I want you to remember that. This is a nicer etrog. See that symmetry, right? It's a little bit less expensive because it's got the green there, but it's doing okay. All right. This is an even better one. And again, you look at the richness of color of these leaves. These are going to be a little bit more expensive. By the way, in this package here, this package here that I showed you before, these come from Israel. Why is it important for them to come from Israel? Because Israel exists now. I mean, in other words, before Israel existed in 1948, all of this stuff didn't come from Israel. But it was very, very hard to get the etrog, to get these guys, because otherwise you had to grow them on your own, and most places just can't. You may have seen, by the way, another species of this at Whole Foods. They call it Buddha's hand, right? And it has all of these tentacles that grow out from it. And they sell them at places like that. They don't sell them at Ralph's or something. But again, this is how we get them now, and they're from Israel. So all of this arrives from Israel. And during those 5 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, especially for Orthodox Jews, it's a very busy time getting ready for this next holy day, in that 5-day time span, building a sukkah, finding the perfect etrog that you can afford and the perfect branches that you can afford. And here you're going to see Orthodox Jews looking to find the best one that they can, right? Look at that. Right? Examining to see if they can get all the green that they can, the darkest green, and that will put extra beauty into their observance of the commandment. You know what these are called? These are called peyote, right? And they get emphasized by cutting the rest of the hair very, very short. This man's rabbi obviously says that they can be blended into your beard. This young man doesn't have a beard yet. Maybe they'll blend in one day, but for now, that we were commanded in the Torah to grow the corners of our faces, right? 1, 2, 3, excuse me, I'm sorry, 1, whoop, backwards. 1, the top of your jaw. 2, the corner of your jaw. 3, your chin. 4, the other corner of your jaw. And 5, the other top of your jaw. So, and to emphasize that mitzvah, to emphasize the commandment, Orthodox Jews will grow out their entire beard and never cut it. Never cut it. Now, you may have seen some Orthodox Jews, without a beard. These guys are all, and you'll see his peyote are all curled up, and his are as well. They just do that after, over years by twirling them with their finger. And it does keep them from getting as long as these, because these are going to get much longer, because he won't cut them ever. Good. So, you can also see that Orthodox Jews, just to make sure that their head is really covered, cover their head and have a kippah underneath, have a yarmulke underneath. This is a etrog case, obviously a beautiful engraved silver case. Here's another nice one. Here's one, just, a nice wooden one. Here's somebody standing with, and the same guy, another guy standing with a complete set of lulav and etrog. And what we do with the lulav and the etrog, so after you sit in a chair in the sukkah and say the blessing, then you're going to stand up and say the blessing for shaking the lulav, which includes all of its component parts. So let's go over the component parts before we understand the shaking. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty well. There are 4 different kinds of growing things here, and they are separated into different categories with different qualities that they have. The etrog has both smell and taste. The palm branch doesn't really have any smell, but it does have a taste. For any of you who have had hearts of palm, you know that it has a taste. The myrtle has a smell and not a taste, and a taste but not a smell, and the willow has neither. So obviously the kind of person that you want to be, with taste representing learning, and smell representing good deeds, you want to be a combination of the two. Now, again, this is nowhere in the Torah. The rabbis they veneered this understanding onto their celebration of Sukkot, so that these represent human qualities, and they represent the best and the worst of human qualities. And the ultimate goal is to be the etrog. Now, they also say that the etrog and all the other parts of the lulav, or the parts of the lulav and the etrog, represent parts of the body. So you could probably tell that the etrog is your heart. And the lulav itself, right in the middle, is your backbone. So you are supposed to be good of heart with a strong backbone, yes? These leaves are they look like lips, right? Especially when you see 2 of them together. So you're supposed to be pure of tongue, as it were, and see the world with innocent eyes. These, if you remember, these little leaves look sort of like an eye. So, and we shake it to 6 directions of creation. First, over your shoulder to the back, right? And then up into the air, and then over your other shoulder, and then to the front, and then to the ground, yes? Because creation is everywhere. Some people think it's sort of a fertility rite. But for us, it was simply blessing the creation and this harvest that we got on at the beginning of Sukkot, the beginning of the harvest, and now the harvest will soon be over. I once had occasion to have a Native American chief be with me in a sukkah. He was also an Episcopalian priest. I'm not exactly sure how those two came together, but he did seem to do a wonderful job of it. And I handed him the lulav and the etrog to shake. And I said, let me tell you how to do it. And he says, oh, I know what to do with this. Because it was almost innate with him to take something like this. He knew exactly what it was and exactly what it was for because of his Native American background. And it was quite beautiful. That one I have in just for fun. That's your fantasy lulav and etrog and a fantasy Jew. Hakafa. At the end of Sukkot, we process with the Torahs around the sanctuary, and we bring our lulav and etrog, I guess that Yoda would bring his too, and we march around the sanctuary. And it looks like this, right? This is a very big Orthodox synagogue. This is where the Torahs are read. You can see that all the Torahs are still dressed in white from the High Holy Days, because they won't be taken off till Simchat Torah, which we'll talk about next time. And here they all are making their circles around the sanctuary with their lulavim, with their palm fronds and their myrtles, and they do have their etrog in their hands, if you can see that. Okay. And then the willow, then they get beaten to the ground, they get beaten to the ground, and that is the end, really, of Sukkot. Now, palm fronds. When Jesus is supposed to come to Jerusalem, when Jesus came to Jerusalem shortly before his crucifixion, shortly before he was executed, he was celebrated along the way by those that believed that he was the Messiah. And they laid a path for him of palm fronds. And this is where Palm Sunday comes from, that this is for hope and for comfort, right? Because this ride of his on the donkey is, he's on the precipice. And we know this. In retrospect, we know that he's on the precipice of his death, right? And so this is already comforting the mourners, which I find absolutely fascinating. And so here is a Palm Sunday procession in Israel. It's really, really quite beautiful. And here, for contrast, is the circles around in front of the wall in Jerusalem. Look at this. It's interesting how all these symbols kind of come together. Now they're used, they represent different things. And that's wonderful. But it is also so clear that we share the same roots. So there we go. Stop the share. Hi, welcome back.
We are, okay, all right. And Neil, I meant to ask you the last time.
Yeah.
We have pictures of the rabbis with the Torah scrolls, holding them up, reading them in worship. Is there a number of Torah scrolls that are ideal for a synagogue, or can it be, I've seen 3, but is that what you're supposed to have, or do some have 100, do some have just 1? Is there
yes, and yes. It's a great mitzvah. It's a great wonderfulness in somebody's life to buy a Torah for a synagogue and give it to the synagogue. So that's what some people do. They are not inexpensive. We'll talk about it next week, but I'll tell you now that it takes a scribe a year or two to handwrite a Torah. So it's a lot of work, and it's a hefty price usually for them. But you can use one Torah all year long, but at certain points of the year, you have to roll it to certain sections because you'll have a special reading for Sukkot, for instance, a special reading for Passover, a special reading for Shavuot, right? And so when you have to do, or, even on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you've got very different readings for each of those days. So if you have a couple of Torah scrolls, it makes it much, much easier.
They're not symbolistic. They're actually used to read from.
Pardon me? Oh, they are used to read from. When we read the Torah portion, we read the Torah portion on Saturday morning, every Saturday, everywhere in the world.
I remember this holiday, especially from living in Manhattan, because of course it's one of the more visible Jewish holidays because
Right.
all the synagogues that are right up against the sidewalk take over the sidewalk.
That's right.
and build these enclosures, open roof enclosures, and so you see a lot of that. You walking around the streets.
Yeah, I meant to have a picture of an apartment building with Sukkot on the balconies, right? And that's how they do it in New York. That's definitely how they do it in Jerusalem. It looks like the building is growing fungus or something because there's green things coming, out of the various spaces on the building. It's terrific.
Walking by and around and listening in New York on this holiday, I know it has a holy and a sacred purpose, but it seemed to also be fun.
Very joyous. Very, very joyous. Really celebrating the harvest, celebrating creation. We always celebrate creation, but also, celebrating that we're not homeless anymore, and we live that experience or try to relive that experience just a little bit anyway, in that exercise of building a sukkah and staying or sitting or sleeping in the sukkah, just a little bit. But but we make it into something beautiful because now, but also it should raise our consciousness.
So really the equivalent in the Christian church is less Thanksgiving, more Harvest Home. In the Christian, especially in rural churches, Neil, you will have a fall holiday called Harvest Home. And there's also Rogation Sunday in the traditional calendar, which I believe is earlier. But any of the farm communities would have a series of these that have very many similarities to what you described.
Well, if you know anything about the progression of religious symbolism and religious practice, so much of it began in agrarian societies that really weren't sure if they didn't celebrate each harvest that it would come again the next year. It's the same reason that we'll talk about this later, but it's the same reason that there is these light holidays at the end of the year, these holidays that have a lot of light, because the winter solstice is right underneath all of that. And people really felt that if they did not request the sun to come back and the days be longer, that it wouldn't happen. And they didn't want to take the chance.
Yeah, listen, why did Christians move Christmas to December 25th rather than May, whatever, that we think is probably his birthday? Well,
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
And that's why, we'll talk about it then, but we'll talk when we talk about Hanukkah, but Hanukkah also was placed there. Okay. Susan, it looks like you're wanting to say something. Am I right?
No, I'm just listening. I'm
Okay.
enjoying.
Okay, good. Okay.
So let me ask a question about the
He
citron
wants to ask.
growing. It has to come from Israel, or can we start, since I'm a farmer, can we start growing them here?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, you
can.
can.
Yeah, sure. There's nothing wrong with growing them here, and they'll be just as kosher as the ones from Israel. Except people usually don't grow them and sell them here. But you could, absolutely. And yeah, I'll be in line.
Okay.
Okay.
You'll have to talk to the farm because
Well, San Diego's a good place to grow that commodity because we have a lot of good growing areas.
Well, the weather patterns in Israel and here are very, very similar.
It
So
is.
yes, you could
why
definitely.
we moved here.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that, so you could definitely grow them. And I don't know how long it takes to get fruit or anything. So, but I'm sure you can. And look, you can buy one at this time, coming up right after Yom Kippur, at some Jewish markets, like in we call the Borscht Belt, versus the Bible Belt. We call it the Borscht Belt.
Fairfax.
Huh?
Fairfax.
Fairfax, right?
Right.
The Pico Robertson neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Max knows from Fairfax.
We do a little bit too. We spent a month there one time in a
I
place.
grew up in Cantor's Delicatessen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kansas.
I went to
Kansas.
Fairfax High School.
Right.
They had a beautiful bakery there too.
All right, anything else?
Any other questions about Sukkot?
Well, I'd like to ask Neil, Rabbi Neil, how are you enjoying these presentations?
Oh, me? These
Yes.
classes? Oh, I love
Yeah.
this. I absolutely love this. I mean, I never talked about Palm Sunday in my introduction to Judaism class before. This is a whole expansive experience for me. So I got to tell you that this is great. This is great.
Well, we're thoroughly enjoying it,
Yes.
and we're very grateful for what you have put into it.
Yes, it's very informative. It's very nice.
Good.
And it's America. This is America. We're a bunch of mixed up people.
Well, we are, and that's I think that is something that people need to recognize a lot more. That we really are a salad bowl, and there's a dressing that connects us, but we have our individual crunches and flavors and contributions to the salad. And the best way to really be American is to make sure that everybody gets to have their own flavor, and taste it exactly the way that they do, and not borrow it,
Well,
in
that was
ways
the intent. That was the intent of our founding fathers when they started this country, as you all know. So religious freedom and freedom from religion was the basis, I think, for the move to the new land, as they called it.
Well,
Neil,
I think they really got frightened from the intertwining of political power and religious influence. That really scared them. They lived through it and they didn't like it.
Although we knew they got it in Virginia. I mean, that's an interesting part of history when you said that Virginia almost had a state religion with Episcopalian and tried to push Baptists out. I mean, it was really interesting. Interesting history, but yeah, and most of them weren't Christian. They were deists. They were.
Yep. But some of them went to seminary.
I know, and they had a special sensitivity then for not having Christianity as a state religion.
Right. And they were, look, they were front runners, really. They really, forged a path where you could respect religion, but also have a society that didn't have a religion.
Right.
Right.
Amazing.
So Neil, I may have misheard you, but when you were talking about the blessings in the different directions, you said did you say there were six?
Six.
You only mentioned four that I heard. It was over one shoulder,
okay.
up and down.
Well, up and down, Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to go to the sides, right? You went over the
So
shoulders
four
and to the sides.
directions, then up and
Yeah.
down.
So it's six. It's the four directions of the wind and up and down.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that Native American person that knew instinctively what to do, because that's one thing that the Native Americans always bless the four directions and up and down.
Right.
And the other thing I was thinking of last time when we talked about the shofar and blowing the shofar, and the patterns, some of the patterns that we blow the shofar are very similar to when in Lakota tradition, at least, when they blow the conch, and it has a remarkably similar sound.
Mm.
So you're right. I think, I mean, some of these holy sounds and holy directions and, blessing and recognizing the all-encompassingness of the universe as all the directions, the sounds, and they all connect.
Something very interesting is going to happen this year on, I think it's the second day of Rosh Hashanah in the afternoon. There's going to be sort of a tag team blowing of the shofar that, shofar blowers are going to come out on various corners through LA County. And they each have a time when they're supposed to start blowing. And it's going to be just all the way, all over the place. It's going to be, and the other about the conch, interfaith organization that I belong to, an Episcopal priest started, Gwyn Gibord. So it's called the Gibord Center. And they kicked off their annual fundraiser one year with a conch blowing and a shofar blowing, kind of in two directions. And it was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, these are very stirring sounds, very stirring sounds. They really are. So,
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.
okay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
O Yavo Shalom Aleinu, O Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Yavo Shalom Aleinu